This is going to be really interesting. How do experts get paid by brands to share what they know? I'm Morris from CreateGrowProfit.com, and today I'm speaking to Amy Gorin from Master the Media. Amy, thanks for making time.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
To talk about what you do for people in PR and brand sponsorships, I read this story on your website about Katie Hadley, and you also have an Instagram video sharing her story. Can you tell us what happened to Katie when she started working with brands?
Yeah, so it's really incredible. So what I do is I was a magazine editor turned registered dietitian turned media coach because what I realized was a lot of healthcare professionals just really are not making the income that they want. They're working crazy hours. And so I started to teach health professionals, including registered dietitians, how to use getting featured in major media outlets like US News, Time Magazine, Eat This Not That, and how to leverage that to land paid brand partnerships. And so you mentioned Katie. Katie's actually an incredible story. I actually recently hired her as Master of the Media's community manager because she is in her 14th or 15th month of the program. So when students sign on, it's 6 months with us. We do intensive coaching. We help them land paid brand partnerships. And then Katie, for instance, and other students just stay with us for the long haul because we're helping them land these incredible brand partnerships. And so Katie's a gut health dietitian, and she was thinking, I want to see less patients, but I want to make more money. And in 6 months of working with me through my Master of the Media program, she earned $41,000 in brand partnerships. And then fast forward, I asked her recently, how much have you made over the last year? And she was like, I think around $90,000 from working with brands. And that's in addition to her private practice income. So this is a really incredible way, and we'll dive more into like your listeners might be thinking, what does all this mean? What is working with brands? But it's a really incredible way to, make additional income. And you're working less because you're getting paid for your expertise, not necessarily, I worked an hour, I get paid for an hour. It's, I provided this incredible value to a brand, so I'm getting paid for that one thing. And it's usually a really high sum.
Yeah, so you already mentioned it. What does Katie have to do to earn those $90,000 in a year from brands?
Yeah, so this is the mind blowing part. When we talk about working with brands, you could be it could be as simple as giving a quote in a press release that a brand sends out to different media outlets, and that deliverable alone could be $5,000. It could be something where you could be hosting a webinar for a brand, and that could be $7,000. And so you can kind of see how this is adding up. That press release, maybe that whole project of talking to the brand about what they need, giving a quote, maybe that took an hour at most. Hosting a webinar, takes a few hours of prep. Hosting it, you know, and that's your hourly rate, if you're thinking about it that way, is over $1,000. And so this is what I help Katie and all of my other students in Master of the Media accomplish, is I teach them how to land these paid brand partnerships. And then also I'm the connector. So I have this network of, right now it's about 7,000 brand representatives, and I'm making connections between them every single day. And that's how a lot of my students will land those high value paid brand partnerships.
Yeah, I learned that about your program, which is very unique. You don't just coach people on how to approach brands and how to work with them, but you actually make the connections. Like, is it literally that how does the connection work? How do you make that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a few different ways. So I've been in this industry for about 20 years, and I've built up a lot of connections over that time. And so I have this list of 7,000 brand representatives and media, news people. And so I send a weekly newsletter out to them every week, highlighting a different one of our students. And we're like, Katie or Uma is here to work with brands. Like, here's what she's really good at. And then a lot of times they'll write back and say, yes, please connect us. So that's one way. Another way is we have a service where anyone who's looking for a brand partner. So if we recently had a supplement company come to us and say we need 8 to 10 health professionals, different types of experts. Send us their names and we'll hire them. And so that's what we did. And they're going to be working with a lot of our experts. And then we also have connections where we this year we actually did quite a few in-person events, like where we brought the brand representatives and our students together in real life and did meet and greets and in-person networking, and that was really cool.
It's really incredible. When you describe it, it sounds so straightforward, and it's especially because you have the network. It almost sounds like you're not just providing value to the experts, but you're also providing value to the brand representatives by connecting them with the right people. You're a matchmaker.
Yeah, that's exactly it's brand partnership matchmaking. There's a plant-based burger company called plant-based meat company called Impossible Foods, and they came to us earlier in the year and they were like, we need 10 people to work with. And so we did a focus group with them, introduced them to a bunch of our people, and then they hired them to partner together. And so they literally told us we never would have found these people without you.
Wow, I can imagine. What does it take to be successful at this as an expert?
Truly, you need one thing: an expertise. So I work with mostly health professionals, dietitians, physicians, nurses, but we've also worked with business coaches, life coaches, professional organizers, travel agents. So as long as you have an expertise, step one is we teach you how to use that expertise to get featured in the media. So, talking about how to organize your life for January, for US News, or how to eat a plant-based diet for eating well. And then the next step is really leveraging that. Hey, I was featured in this huge outlet. I've reached millions of people. And then what I teach my students is, not to write a brand and say, hey, I'm Amy, I'm awesome. Like, do you want to do some social media together? That's not going to land super well. They get hundreds of emails like that. What I teach my students is to identify gaps in what a brand is offering information wise. So say you're talking about a peanut butter. You're like, I love this peanut butter. I make these really healthy peanut butter balls and peanut butter smoothies. And they're so healthy, and I tell all of my clients about them. And I go to your website and I don't see any recipes. Let me help you with that. I'm a really great recipe developer. I even take professional quality pictures. I can provide nutritional analysis. And so really what you're trying to do is just to pique the brand's interest and then get them on a phone call or a Zoom call and find out, what do they need? Like, what are their gaps? Are they a really science-based company and they have no science on their website and they need help to communicate that in a really consumer-friendly way? Are they trying to reach more health professionals? Maybe that's something you can help them connect with. It's really those connecting the dots. And the really incredible thing is you don't really need a social media following. Of course, it helps. It opens up the door to do more things. Like, yes, if you have a social media following, you can do social media posts with the brand. But a lot of times, what a brand is hiring you for is something that's going to go onto their website, or something that's going to be behind the scenes messaging that you're crafting for them. Or maybe it's social media content that's going on their platforms, not yours. And so people don't believe me when I tell them this. And it's like, then they do my program and they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Katie, who you mentioned earlier, she had about 600 Instagram followers when she joined Master the Media. And you've seen what she did. She landed, almost $100,000 in brand partnerships in the last year.
That's amazing. Yeah, and when you mentioned earlier the webinars, I assume that the brand hires you or pays you to run the webinar, but you don't have to fill up the webinar with people. They're organizing the event, you show up and host the event.
So it can go either way. If you don't have that network, yes. You can say, I am the talent, I will show up, I will do the presentation. You can use, hey, Amy's an awesome dietitian to get people into the door. I offer full service webinars where I say, okay, you're going to hire me to host a webinar. I'm going to send out newsletter blasts to my list because I have 13,000 healthcare practitioners on that list. I'm going to post about it on social media. Then I'm going to host the webinar on Zoom. I'm going to hire the tech assistant to help run everything and do the recording. And so the reason I offer that is because honestly, I want those names from the brand. If they're opening up this to their following and say they have 1,000 followers, I have 13,000 followers, then all of a sudden I get those 1,000 followers onto my list, and then that's something I can offer next time to a brand. Hey, I have 14,000 followers, and so that's how you can kind of grow your following in a really fast way.
You just answered my next question. I was curious. I mean, you already said you've worked in this industry for 20 years, but I was still curious how you accumulated a network of 7,000 people as brand representatives and 13,000 health practitioners. And now you just answered it. I guess you put in the extra work to host these events, and that's how you grow your network yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of different strategies. So when I worked as a magazine editor for about a decade. So I worked in New York City. I was the person who would hire experts to write articles, and I worked at Prevention and Health and Parents, American Baby, um, and when I was, you know, I always saved all of my contacts, and when I left that job, I probably had a couple thousand brand contacts at that point. And then I emailed them and I was like, hey, you knew me as an editor. Now I'm a dietitian. I'm doing this other thing. And then it's really, a couple different things like word of mouth. They're sharing, hey, sign up for Amy's list. She sends out these newsletters. Um, and then in-person networking, like I spend a lot of time just making connections, honestly, talking to brands about how they can work with my students, and then they're like, hey, can I be part of your network? And then, yeah, the webinars, that's another really, really great way.
So you mentioned identifying gaps for these brands, right? Like if someone's a chiropractor and they want to work with brands, how much do they have to know about brand marketing, branding, sales, marketing in general to identify these gaps? Or is that what you coach people through?
That's what we coach people. So you don't have to know anything coming into the doors of working with me. When someone signs up for Master the Media, we have a whole educational library of 12 modules, and that's all self-paced. And then we have weekly coaching and daily coaching through our Facebook group, and that's where we teach you all of these ins and outs. We do exercises to make it real life. We're like, okay, literally, here's a template on how to write a brand pitch. Write a brand pitch. We're going to have our instructors review it and give you feedback on it. And then you can send it to the brand. But if you think about it, a chiropractor works with patients every day. They recommend probably pillows, you know, ointments that help with pain. And they're seeing those in the box and out of the box ways that their clients use those products. And so that's really what it comes down to. One of my students, she's a fitness instructor. And so she was really excited the other day. She's like, there's this shoe company. They're like waterproof shoes. And I use them all the time. And I found a gap. Like they show pictures on their website of people paddleboarding in these shoes. But I teach water aerobics and people wear these shoes. And so that's something I want to reach out to the brand, maybe offer some water aerobics classes on video that people can download, or whatever it is. And that's the step one of getting the brand excited about talking to you. That's your goal. It's not that the brand is necessarily going to say, yes, we want to hire you to make water aerobics videos, but they want to say, wow, this person's blowing us away. They're not just emailing us like every other person saying, hey, I can post about you on social media. Do you want to pay me? You're offering them something unique. And then you get on the call with them and you say, so what are your goals? Like, who are you trying to target? What are you trying to communicate to them? What lists are you trying to grow? How can I help you? And that's when you start talking about not what they already have budget for, but this is how I've gotten brands to literally come up with $50,000 budgets to pay me for things that they didn't know that they needed. Then after talking to me, they're like, yeah, we really need that.
Wow, do you have an example of such a big deal?
Yeah, so there's a restaurant company that I worked with, and my first conversation with them was they came to me. There was a spokesperson job, which a spokesperson is you're the outward communication for the brand. You're doing media, you're hosting events, and it came down to me and one other person. And I actually didn't get the job, which is totally fine. But I was like, I have their ear, so I'm going to tell them, hey, I think I can really help you make your ingredients a little bit healthier, make your health. You have these products, they sell really well, but how can we make them healthier? Because that's something, people really care about right now. And so then they created, a 5-figure amount of money for me to create a whole report for them on how to make their menu healthier. And then the next year, they hired me as their spokesperson to spread the word about all of these healthy changes that we were making. And none of that money existed in their budget. They just were like, yes, we want to do this. We'll make it happen.
Wow, thanks for sharing that, Amy. So what you're saying is identifying the gap is about standing out in the flood of emails that these brands receive and getting your foot on the call.
Yeah, and because that's something that, I'm not saying you can't do this on your own, but a lot of times we hear from people like, oh, I don't know if I need a program because, I've gotten, two paid brand partnerships and I got $1,000 from each of them. And so what we help people do is like, okay, if you're talking with a brand about $1,000 partnership, how can we turn that into $10,000? And how can we turn that into $50,000? And then how can we get that brand to work with you every single year for the next 5 or 10 years? And then you don't have to work so hard to get the work.
And I can imagine that also helps you grow your own personal brand because you now have exposure doing things for the brand that's paying you.
Exactly. So, yes, it's like the first time you do anything, you have that proof of concept. Yes, now I have done a webinar for a brand, or now I have created recipes for a brand. And then I also just call it like it's the never ending circle, right? Where you're getting paid by a brand to maybe be featured on their social media website, social media platform. And maybe you had 100 followers, and now after being featured, say you have 1,000 followers, and that is going to pique the interest of another brand to want to do something different with you, and that's going to get people to your website, and then you're going to grow your email list, and it kind of just like keeps on going in a circle.
How hard is it to contact brand representatives? Like, is it just a matter of looking them up on Google, or does it take more than that?
There's a strategy, and we teach people. It's like all of this is, I don't want to oversimplify it, but once you know the strategy and you take away all of the guessing games, it's pretty streamlined. So I don't want to call it cyber stalking, but it kind of is like,
It's the good kind of cyber stalking.
yeah. So, and we've taught classes on this, and the classes in itself is like an hour long on kind of teaching all the ins and outs of like how to find a contact. But the long and short of it is you're looking for someone with like a communications or marketing or public relations title, and that's the person that you want to contact. And you want to contact them over email, not over social media DMs or LinkedIn DMs. And then that's kind of, in a nutshell, I'm very, very much oversimplifying it. But one thing that we just started doing was when students enroll in our program, we send them a box filled with samples from brands who are interested in working with them, and then the contact information for all of those brands. So then they get like a kickstart into, okay, I'll start with this list, and then I'll do my own research.
Yeah, you make it fun.
It is really fun.
What you're describing is, yeah, it's fascinating because in the marketing world, we have cold outreach, right? And what ends up happening is that, I just, before this, like someone sent me a video and basically the person said that they've automated their entire cold outreach with AI, right? And it's like the AI is scraping the emails, the AI is writing the emails, the AI is booking the calls, all those things. And I'm thinking, I hear these stories, but personally, I have not yet met someone where that actually works, unless it's a specific setup.
Yeah, I think AI is really cool, but yeah, we're not there yet.
No, but I really love your approach of putting in the effort and the brain power to identify these gaps and to essentially start a conversation with them, right? And showcase your expertise in the email that you're writing and the email that you're sending.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to that human connection, which, you know, AI has yet to recreate that. But you're showing the brand, yes, I'm a real person. I have feelings and emotions about your product, and I want to communicate that to people. And sometimes, the other thing I tell my students all the time is sometimes you're going to contact a brand, and like my story with the restaurant company, they hired me pretty immediately. And there's other times, where I've talked with a brand, say for a year and a half, and then they say they've never worked with someone like me. Then they have to go to their CEO, get approval for the money, and that, I have a story where that literally happened, and it was about $50,000, and that was well worth the year of keeping in touch. And honestly, I really like the people who I talk to, so I want to keep in touch with them anyway. But that's something that really matters in this world, is that human connection.
I really love your approach. When somebody is listening to this, how do they know that they are expert enough to do that? Talking about imposter syndrome.
Okay, let's do a little workshop with you.
Yeah.
What are you an expert in?
I'm an expert in digital marketing.
Okay, tell me why.
I've been doing this for over 10 years, started as a blogger, and now I help coaches and small businesses create content online and grow their email list.
Okay, so you are an expert in digital marketing. Literally, someone, I'll give you a couple different examples. So I'm a dietitian. I have degrees. I have a dietitian license. That makes me an expert. But we have someone who's one of our students, and he by trade is a physical therapist, and he's a self-taught finance expert. He's spent about 10 years teaching himself all the ins and outs of this. And yes, like that still counts as an expert because there's no official training, but he's been featured in US News as a finance expert. I have someone who comes to my house and helps me organize my closets. She's a professional organizer. There's no course that she took. I just think she's amazing, and I tell all my friends about her. So it's basically like, is there something that you know a lot about that you either have formal training in, or you end up giving a lot of advice on? And if the answer is yes, then that's your expertise. And don't overthink it, is the answer.
Would it be correct to even say that you might not consider yourself as an expert, let's say in, I don't know, like diet, okay, in general, but there might be a brand or a product that you really love and you're an expert in that product and that's still...
Yeah, that can absolutely happen. Maybe there's something, and this is where those out of the box solutions come in. So maybe you're a business coach and you're like, there's this planner that you just love, like you've been using for the last 20 years. There's all these digital options, but like you will never stop using this paper planner. And so that could be something that you communicate with that brand about, like, hey, let me get people to just really embrace the whole pen and paper concept, because I've been using this for 20 years and I love it. Or it could be something where I'm a dietitian and I'm talking, this is an actual example that I'll give you. I've worked with mattress companies where I'm like, I need a good night's sleep to be able to make smart decisions about everything health related and to run my business. And so anything that's a hook that you can make that even loose connection is something that you can embrace in this world of brand partnerships. I've worked with furniture companies where I'm like, yes, having a well decorated house helps me feel like I can breathe and I can focus. And so really, if there's any way to connect the dots, then it works.
What are some, or if it even exists, are there like category of industries or brands that are really good to approach? Because right now, as you're sharing this, I'm thinking probably a SaaS company, like a software company. That's just my assumption, is not as good to approach as, for example, a cosmetics company.
I'm going to give you, like, there's kind of two parts to this answer. So there's the companies that are used to partnering and used to paying for partnerships. Like food companies, supplement companies are great examples. They are used to paying experts to post on social media, to host webinars, to host events. Then there's the companies that are not very familiar with this. It might be a restaurant company, it might be a software company, it could be your microphone blue that I see on your screen. And so what happens sometimes is you'll reach out to these brands and they'll say, oh, I've never considered, paying an expert to do what you're suggesting, but that makes sense. Let's talk about it. Or it could go the other way where they're just like, we're a tiny company and the answer is no. But it never hurts to try. And that's how I've gotten some of my most fun partnerships where like I love coffee. Like during the pandemic, I literally just like was like, I'm gonna make all these coffee recipes because I can't go to coffee shops. And so I ended up partnering with this really high end coffee company. They make these high end machines. And that came about because like they really never partnered in a big way with a dietitian. And when I told them all the different ideas I had, they were like, yes, let's make that happen. And it took, to be fair, it did take a little bit of time for them to kind of come up with that budget. It took about a year of conversations, but I ended up making a recipe book for them. I had a lot of fun. I got to keep all the equipment and I got paid for it.
Yeah, you're so right. It's essentially building those connections with the brands that you already resonate with, that you have ideas for, and maybe the times now, maybe the times later, or maybe they have, other ideas that they want to include you in. I guess that's where the follow up is going to be key to stay in touch.
Yeah, and it could be literally like you reach out, you're like, I have this awesome idea. And they're like, wait a minute, let's hold on that idea because we've been looking for someone like you, but we've just been dragging our feet. We didn't want to actually, we didn't have time to do anything about it, but we have this project and you'd be perfect for it. And that does happen too.
Yeah, and in this process, I can already imagine like people who want to, do this. It's going to be so important, like the subject line of the email. How do you write them? All those things, and that's where training like yours is absolutely key.
Now you're reading my mind. I literally say over and over, like the subject line is the most important part of your email because if it's not, oh my gosh, I have to open this email, then nothing's going to get read.
Yeah, so I think it's fine to to get accustomed to the process to doing it yourself, but ultimately like you need those subject lines, you need the first line, you need the call to action, you need to know how to write this stuff, you need to know how to show up on the call, right? All those things to actually make it work. So that's where a program like yours is really really valuable. Amy, one last question. Influencer marketing, the term that we've gotten used to on social media, it sounds saturated. How big is the gap in working with brands?
I call the people that I work with experts with influence because an influencer has, by default, millions of followers. To be an influencer, a brand will come to them and say, okay, our goal is to make sales. And that influencer will post about a product and they might make thousands of dollars in sales. When a brand comes to one of my students and says that, I'm always like, no, that cannot be your goal because what happens when, say, I post about something on my social media is you might say, oh, that coffee looks great, but you don't act on it. And then 2 months later, you see it in a grocery store and you buy it and you can't remember. You have no idea. Did you hear about it from me or did you hear about it from a commercial? And it's not trackable. And so what happens when brands hire experts with influence is they're getting that endorsement. They're saying, Amy, a registered dietitian, is putting her stamp of approval on this healthy coffee. Or Morris, who is an incredible marketing expert, is putting his stamp of approval on this microphone because he hosts this amazing podcast. And that's what gets people somewhere in the next like few years. It's the really long game to want to purchase or try this product. And that's why I say social media only matters to a certain degree because you are never going to have the same end result goal as an influencer. And that's why the market's never going to be saturated.
Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying that, Amy. And you're right. The social media approach is much too narrow for all the other opportunities out there. And I think because the social media approach eats up most of the attention, right, from the provider side, right? When people think I want to work with brands, usually they first think now I need to build an audience first. But as you've shared here in this conversation, there are so many other opportunities. And I have a feeling that not many people are actually offering these other things to brands.
Honestly, I don't think they are. And that's something I've been having, we do weekly coaching with our students. And that's something I've been talking to them like every week about is the landscape is changing and we can't necessarily project where it's going to be in a year or 2 years. But what I can tell you now is part of their job as an expert is not just providing the service of hosting the webinar, hosting the event, creating content for their website. It's also guiding the brand on what's possible and what they need and thinking outside of the box and opening up their eyes to all of these different ways to get people's attention.
That makes total sense. So this is how experts get paid by working with brands. They have cool ideas for things that they can do for a brand and then reach out, build that connection, and there's opportunity in there. It sounds so simple.
Yes, it is, because that's it's funny, like that's literally the only pushback I get is like, this sounds too good to be true. This sounds too simple. And it's like, but I've spent 20 years finessing this process. So it's been tried and true.
You have perfected the process. That's why it becomes simple, you know? Like imagine inventing a delicious recipe or following the recipe that's posted online, right?
Exactly.
Amy, so people who want to check out your program, what can they do now?
So we actually have a free how to get started guide, and I'm just checking the URL right now. Okay, if you want to learn more about getting started with getting paid by brands as an expert, you can go to masterthemedia.co/start, and we have a free guide.
I read that guide and it's really good, and that's where I also saw the Katie story. Yeah, I love the site. It's like a worksheet where you ask those questions of what's your expertise, what is it that you enjoy doing, which kind of brands you want to work with. It's a really good starter guide. Amy, thank you so much for being here, for sharing all these stories. I think it's really inspiring, you know, especially today where with AI and all the insecurities that are around in the market in general, hearing advice like yours is so inspiring and motivating and reassuring that there are opportunities out there. And this is a huge opportunity that I don't think a lot of people think of.
Thank you so much for checking it out.
Yeah, please download the starter guide.
I'm really excited for, all the people who are their interest is piqued and they want to learn more about this. I'm really excited to chat with them all.
Amy, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.